when the hospital owner's daughter screamed, "You are a nobody! You're fired!" In front of everyone, I just smiled, because fate had an incredible twist in store. Exactly 20 minutes later, with her mother's and unborn siblings' lives hanging by a thread, I was the only nobody who could save them. What happened in the operating room that day wasn't just a birth, it was the complete destruction of arrogance. You will never guess what happened in the end. Before we continue, if you love seeing justice served, please subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you are listening from. If you're ready, let's go back to that stormy day. This hospital is my father's kingdom, and you are just a waste of space here, Daphne. When Valerie's shrill voice echoed through the marble corridors of St. Alden Medical Center, I felt my knuckles turn white from gripping the files. My name is Daphne Carter. I am 36 years old, and I have spent 15 years of my life in these corridors, holding people's hands during their most difficult moments. I do my job with passion, and my patients love me. But for Valerie Alden, the 28-year-old daughter of the hospital owner, none of this mattered. Valerie was one of those people who thought power and money could buy everything. She especially had no tolerance for women who stood on their own 2 feet and commanded respect. The fact that I was held in high regard by nurses and doctors alike inflicted deep wounds on her ego. That morning, she had marched up to me again for a trivial reason. Right in the middle of the nurses' station, amidst the bewildered looks of patients and colleagues, she pointed her finger at my chest. "My father is taking over the board with full authority in just days. And do you know what my first act will be? Scraping that fake smile of yours off this building. You are just an ordinary, simple nurse. I won't even wait for you to make a mistake. Your mere existence annoys me." Her words were like a slap, even though my professional side said, "Stay calm, Daphne. She's just a spoiled child." My heart was broken. Under this roof where I had given years of my life, it made my blood boil that she tried to rule over me with her father's money. I knew she was forging reports and digging my grave behind my back, but that moment, humiliating me in front of everyone, was the straw that broke the camel's back, just as I opened my mouth, thinking of resigning with my dignity. It wasn't that terrifying announcement from the hospital speakers, but screams coming from the end of the hall that cut everything short. "Help! Someone help! My mother is collapsing!" The voice didn't belong to Valerie. It belonged to the panicked assistants rushing a gurney. As the gurney sped past us, I saw the person on it, Monica Alden, Valerie's mother. She was 52 years old and in the final weeks of a high-risk pregnancy that everyone said was impossible. But there was a problem, a very big problem. The hospital owner was out of town. The chief physician had left the building for an emergency meeting, and the on-call specialist in the maternity ward had gone down to the ER to attend to the injured from a chain reaction traffic accident. The floor was empty. Monica was writhing in blood. The baby was coming, and the situation looked anything but normal. Valerie's face, once full of arrogance, was instantly wiped clean, replaced by pure terror. She was trembling as she tried to hold her mother's hand. "Where is the doctor? Somebody do something!" she screamed. Everyone froze. The interns stepped back in fear. In that moment, amidst that chaos, I was the only one keeping my cool. My eyes shifted to the monitors. The baby's heart rate was dropping. Monica was going into shock. If we didn't intervene immediately, both would be dead within minutes. I took a step forward. As I put on my gloves, the authority in my voice drowned out Valerie's earlier screams. "Prepare operating room 1, immediately." The chaos in the hallway transformed into organized urgency as my voice cut through the panic like a scalpel through flesh. I had delivered hundreds of babies in my career, managed countless emergencies, but something about this moment felt different, heavier, as if destiny itself had orchestrated this convergence of crisis and reckoning. Monica's blood pressure was plummeting on the monitor. Her face had gone ghostly pale, and the baby's heartbeat was becoming erratic. a desperate drum signaling imminent catastrophe. I had perhaps 10 minutes, maybe less, before we lost them both. Get her to OR1 now. I need 2 units of O-negative standing by. Call anesthesia and someone find me an available surgical nurse. My commands were rapid but clear, each word measured and essential. The interns, who had been frozen moments before, suddenly sprang into action, their training overriding their fear. I was already moving alongside the gurney, my hands assessing Monica's condition even as we raced down the corridor. Her contractions were coming too fast, too hard, and there was far too much blood. This wasn't a normal premature labor. Something was catastrophically wrong. Valerie stumbled after us, her designer heels clicking frantically against the tile floor, her face streaked with tears and terror. Gone was the imperious princess who had threatened my job 20 minutes ago. In her place was a frightened daughter watching her mother slip toward death. "Please, please, you have to save her," she sobbed, grabbing at my arm. "I know I said terrible things, but please, Daphne, please don't let her die." I didn't have time to address her desperation or her sudden change in attitude. Every second counted. "Stay in the waiting area, Valerie. I need to focus," I said firmly but not unkindly, pulling away from her grip. A security guard gently but firmly held her back as we burst through the operating room doors. The sterile lights blazed overhead as the team scrambled to prep. Monica was barely conscious now, her breathing shallow and labored, her lips forming wordless pleas. "Monica, can you hear me? I'm Daphne, and I'm going to take care of you and your baby. Stay with me," I said, leaning close to her face as the anesthesiologist worked to establish an IV line. Her eyes flickered open, clouded with pain and fear, but there was recognition there. She had seen me around the hospital before, though we had never spoken directly. Now her life, and her baby's life, rested entirely in my hands. The anesthesiologist, Dr. Patel, a composed man in his 50s, quickly assessed the situation. Blood pressure is 70/40 and dropping. Heart rate at 130. The baby's in severe distress, Daphne. We're looking at a placental abruption, maybe a complete separation. His voice was steady, but his eyes told me everything I needed to know. This was as bad as it gets. Placental abruption means the placenta has torn away from the uterine wall, cutting off the baby's oxygen supply and causing massive internal bleeding for the mother. Without immediate surgical intervention, both would die, and even with intervention, the odds were terrifyingly slim. Then we go in now. No time for a full epidural. We need general anesthesia, and we need it 30 seconds ago, I said, already scrubbing in at the sink with practiced efficiency. My mind was racing through protocols, contingencies, worst-case scenarios. I had assisted in emergency C-sections before, but performing one solo with a patient this unstable and a baby this compromised was something else entirely. But there was no choice. I was all they had. As Dr. Patel administered the anesthesia and Monica's eyes finally closed, I took my position at the surgical table. The scrub nurse, young Sandra Hayes, who had only been with us 6 months, looked at me with wide, nervous eyes. "I've never been lead on something like this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Then today you learn," I said, meeting her gaze with steady confidence I didn't entirely feel. "Trust your training. Follow my lead, and we'll bring them both through this." Scalpel. The blade felt heavy in my hand as I made the first incision, a smooth horizontal line across Monica's lower abdomen. Blood welled up immediately, more than there should have been, confirming Dr. Patel's diagnosis. The placenta had indeed separated, and the bleeding was massive. I worked quickly but carefully, my hands moving with the muscle memory of thousands of procedures, deepening the incision through layers of tissue and muscle until I reached the uterus itself. "Suction," I commanded, and Sandra was there instantly, clearing my field of vision. The baby was right there, visible through the uterine wall, but the amniotic sac was filled with blood, a dark and ominous sign. I made the uterine incision, and suddenly I was reaching in, my hands finding the tiny body, slippery and still. For one heart-stopping moment, I thought we were too late. The baby wasn't moving, wasn't responding. But then, as I lifted the infant free and handed it to the waiting pediatric team that had just rushed in, I saw the chest shudder, a weak breath, then another. "It's a girl," someone said. But I was already back to Monica, fighting to control the hemorrhaging. The uterus wasn't contracting properly, the bleeding wouldn't stop, and her blood pressure was continuing to crash, despite the transfusion Dr. Patel was pushing through the IV. This was the critical moment, the razor's edge between life and death. My hands moved almost independently of my conscious thought, applying compression, injecting medications to stimulate uterine contraction, using every technique I had ever learned or witnessed. "Blood pressure is 50/30, Daphne. We're losing her." Dr. Patel's voice had an edge of alarm now. The monitors were screaming, alarms blaring in a cacophony of crisis. Sandra's hands were shaking as she tried to keep up with my demands for instruments and supplies. Sweat was running down my face despite the cool temperature of the OR. I could feel my own heart pounding, adrenaline surging through every nerve. And then, just as I was preparing to make the devastating call for a potential hysterectomy to save Monica's life, something shifted. The medications kicked in, the uterus suddenly contracted hard beneath my hands, and the bleeding began to slow. It wasn't stopping completely, but it was becoming manageable, controllable. I worked with renewed intensity, repairing the uterine incision with rapid, precise sutures, my fingers flying through the closure even as I monitored every drop of blood loss. "Pressure stabilizing at 90/60. Dr. Patel announced, and I could hear the relief flooding his voice. "Heart rate coming down to 110. She's responding." 15 minutes later, I was closing the final layer of Monica's abdomen, my hands steady despite the exhaustion beginning to creep into my muscles. The baby, little Emma Alden as I would later learn she was named, was in the NICU receiving oxygen and warming care. But the pediatric team had given a cautiously optimistic assessment. She was breathing on her own, her vitals were improving, and barring unforeseen complications, she would likely be fine. And Monica, against all odds, had survived what should have killed her. As I pulled off my blood-soaked gloves and stepped back from the table, the weight of what had just happened finally hit me. My legs felt weak, my hands started to tremble slightly with the aftershocks of adrenaline, but inside I felt a profound sense of gratitude mixed with exhaustion. Sandra was staring at me with something close to awe. Dr. Patel clasped my shoulder briefly, a gesture of deep respect between colleagues who had just walked through fire together. "That was extraordinary, Daphne. I've been doing this for 30 years, and I've rarely seen someone hold it together like that under such pressure. You saved them both," he said quietly. I managed a tired smile. "We saved them together. Every person in this room contributed to this outcome." But even as I said it, I knew the truth. If I hadn't been there, if I hadn't taken command in that hallway when everyone else froze, Monica and Emma would both be dead right now. The very nurse that Valerie had tried to destroy just minutes before had become the only thing standing between her family and complete tragedy. As I walked out of the operating room, still in my surgical scrubs with Monica's blood staining the fabric, I was met with an eruption of activity in the hallway outside. News of the emergency had spread through the hospital like wildfire, and it seemed like half the staff had gathered near the OR waiting area, anxious for updates. Nurses I had worked with for years, doctors from other departments, even maintenance workers who had heard the commotion, all turned to look at me as I emerged through the double doors. The exhaustion must have been evident on my face, but before I could say anything, I saw Valerie. She was collapsed in one of the waiting room chairs, her expensive clothing rumpled and tear-stained, her perfectly styled hair now a mess around her face. When she saw me, she literally leaped to her feet, her eyes wild with desperate hope and lingering terror. Is she alive? Please tell me she's alive. And the baby?" Her voice cracked on the last word. All the arrogance and cruelty from earlier completely evaporated, replaced by raw human vulnerability. I nodded slowly, allowing myself a small, genuine smile despite my exhaustion. "Your mother is stable and in recovery. The surgery was complicated and she lost a significant amount of blood, but she's going to be okay. And you have a baby sister. She's small and will need to stay in the NICU for monitoring, but she's breathing on her own and fighting hard. They're both going to make it, Valerie." The transformation that came over Valerie's face was something I will never forget. The color that had drained from her cheeks flooded back. Her knees actually buckled, and she had to grab the back of the chair to keep from falling. A sound emerged from her throat that was half sob, half laugh, pure relief given voice. And then, to my complete shock, she crossed the distance between us in 3 quick steps and threw her arms around me, burying her face against my shoulder as she broke down completely. "Thank you, thank you, thank you," she kept repeating, her whole body shaking with sobs. "I was so horrible to you. I said such terrible things, and you still saved them. You could have let her die. You could have refused, but you saved them both. I don't deserve your help, but you gave it anyway. Thank you, Daphne. Thank you so much." I stood there, somewhat awkwardly, as this woman who had been tormenting me for months cried in my arms. Part of me wanted to push her away, to throw her earlier cruelty back in her face, to make her truly understand the pain she had caused. But the larger part of me, the part that had chosen nursing as a calling rather than just a career, understood that this moment was bigger than our personal conflict. I had not saved Monica to punish Valerie or prove a point. I had saved Monica because that is what I do, because every life matters, because my oath and my conscience demanded nothing less. "Valerie," I said gently, carefully extricating myself from her embrace and holding her at arm's length so I could look into her red, swollen eyes. "I didn't save your mother and sister to earn your gratitude or prove anything to you. I did it because it was the right thing to do, because they needed help and I had the skills to provide it. That's what being a healthcare provider means. We don't choose who to save based on whether they've been kind to us or whether we like their family members. We save everyone we can, every single time, because that's the job." She nodded frantically, tears still streaming down her face. I know, and that makes what I did to you even more unforgivable. I've been a monster to you, Daphne. I was jealous of how much everyone respected you, how good you are at your job, how you never needed my father's money or name to be important here. I felt small around you, so I tried to make you small instead. I tried to get you fired. I spread lies about you. I made your life miserable, and all because I was insecure and petty. And then today, when I needed someone more than I've ever needed anyone in my life, you were there. You didn't hesitate. You didn't make me beg. You just stepped up and saved everything that matters to me. I don't know how to even begin to apologize for the person I've been. Before I could respond, the elevator at the end of the hall chimed, and the doors slid open to reveal 2 men in expensive suits striding out with the kind of purposeful urgency that commands attention. I recognized them immediately. Richard Alden, the hospital owner and Valerie's father, a tall, silver-haired man in his late 50s with the bearing of someone accustomed to power and control, and beside him, Dr. Marcus Hendricks, the chief of medicine who had been at the emergency board meeting when Monica went into labor. Both men looked tense and worried, clearly having rushed back as soon as they received word of the emergency. Richard Alden's eyes swept the hallway, taking in the gathered staff, his daughter's tear-stained face, and me standing there in blood-stained scrubs, and his expression shifted rapidly through several emotions: confusion, worry, and then sharp focus. "Where is my wife? What happened? Someone tell me what the hell is going on?" His voice was commanding but edged with barely controlled panic. the voice of a man who was used to being in control suddenly finding himself in a situation where control had been taken from him. Dr. Hendricks spotted me and moved quickly in my direction, his face grave. "Daphne, I just heard about the emergency. I came as fast as I could. Please tell me Monica is all right. What was the situation?" I straightened my shoulders, pushing past the exhaustion, and addressed both men with the same professional calm I had maintained throughout the crisis. Mrs. Alden experienced a complete placental abruption and went into premature labor approximately 45 minutes ago. When she arrived, there were no available obstetric specialists on the floor due to the traffic accident emergency in the ER. She was hemorrhaging severely, and both she and the baby were in immediate life-threatening distress. I performed an emergency cesarean section with the assistance of Dr. Patel and Nurse Hayes. Mrs. Alden lost significant blood and required transfusion, but the surgery was successful. She is currently stable and in post-op recovery. The baby, a girl, is in the NICU receiving standard care for premature infants, but is breathing independently and responding well. Both are expected to make full recoveries. Richard Alden's face went through another series of rapid transformations as he processed this information. The panic faded, replaced by overwhelming relief, but then his eyes sharpened as he seemed to truly register what I had said. "You performed the surgery? You're a nurse, not a surgeon. Who authorized this? Where were the doctors?" The question hung in the air like an accusation, and I felt several people in the hallway stiffen at his tone. It was a valid question from a medical legal standpoint, but the way he asked it, with that edge of suspicion and authority, made it clear he was already thinking about liability and protocol rather than the fact that his wife and newborn daughter were alive. Dr. Hendricks jumped in before I could respond, his voice firm and supportive. "Richard, Daphne Carter is one of the most experienced and skilled nurses in this hospital. She has 15 years of obstetric experience, has assisted in hundreds of deliveries, including dozens of emergency C-sections, and holds advanced certifications that qualify her to perform emergency procedures under crisis circumstances when no physician is available. Given the immediate, life-threatening nature of the situation and the complete absence of surgical staff on the floor, her decision to intervene was not only appropriate, but necessary. If she had waited even 5 more minutes for someone else to arrive, Monica would have bled to death, and the baby would have died from oxygen deprivation. She saved them both, Richard. You should be thanking her, not questioning her credentials." The chief's words carried weight, and I saw some of the suspicion drain from Richard Alden's expression, but he still looked unsettled, like a man trying to reconcile multiple conflicting thoughts. Valerie, who had been standing silently beside me, suddenly stepped forward, her voice stronger now despite the tears still glistening on her cheeks. "Daddy, Daphne is a hero. I was there. When Mom collapsed, I saw how bad it was and everyone else was panicking or running around like they didn't know what to do. But Daphne took charge immediately. She knew exactly what to do, and she didn't hesitate for a second, even though—" Her voice faltered slightly, and she glanced at me with guilt-stricken eyes before continuing. Even though I had just finished screaming at her and telling her she was going to be fired, I was horrible to her this morning, Daddy, absolutely cruel, and she still saved Mom's life anyway. She's the reason you still have a wife, and I still have a mother, and we have a new baby sister. Without Daphne, they would both be dead right now. The silence that followed Valerie's confession was profound and heavy, broken only by the soft beeping of monitors from nearby patient rooms and the distant sound of the hospital's life continuing around us. Richard Alden's face underwent yet another transformation, this time settling into something that looked almost like shame mixed with dawning comprehension. He turned his full attention to me for the first time, really looking at me not as a subordinate or a potential liability, but as the person who had just pulled his family back from the edge of an abyss. "Is this true?" he asked quietly, his voice stripped of its earlier authority and replaced with something more human, more vulnerable. Did you really perform that surgery alone, under those conditions, and save both of them? I met his gaze steadily, refusing to be diminished by his scrutiny. I wasn't alone, Mr. Alden. Dr. Patel provided anesthesia and critical support. Nurse Hayes assisted throughout the procedure, and the pediatric team was there for the baby. It was a team effort, as all medical emergencies are. But yes, I was the primary surgeon because there was no one else available, and your wife and daughter would have died if someone hadn't acted immediately. I did what any competent medical professional would have done in that situation. I did my job. Something shifted in Richard Alden's expression, a crack in the armor of corporate authority and controlled power that he wore so naturally. His eyes moved to his daughter, taking in her disheveled appearance and tear-stained face, and I could see him connecting pieces of a puzzle he hadn't even known existed. "Valerie, what did you do to this woman?" His voice was quiet but carried an undertone of disappointment that made Valerie flinch. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking much younger than her 28 years, like a child caught in wrongdoing and forced to face consequences. "I've been terrible to her for months, Daddy. I bullied her. I humiliated her in front of colleagues and patients. I made up false complaints and tried to get her fired. Just this morning, right before Mom collapsed, I told her she was nobody and that as soon as you took full control of the board, I would make sure she was the first person thrown out of this hospital. I was cruel and petty and jealous, and I tried to destroy her career because I couldn't stand that everyone respected her more than they respected me." Richard Alden closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them again, I could see genuine pain there, alongside the disappointment. "Why, Valerie? Why would you do something like that?" "Because she has everything I want, and she didn't need your money or your name to get it," Valerie said, her voice breaking. "Everyone in this hospital loves her because she's good at what she does and she cares about people. When she walks down these halls, nurses smile at her, doctors consult with her, patients ask for her by name. She built that respect with her own hands, her own skill, her own dedication. And I realize that no matter how much money we have or how much power you give me, I'll never have what she has because I haven't earned it. I've been living off your reputation my whole life, and instead of trying to build my own, I tried to tear hers down. I'm so ashamed, Daddy. And the worst part is that after everything I did to her, she still saved Mom without a second thought." I watched this family drama unfold with a strange sense of detachment, my exhaustion finally catching up with me now that the adrenaline was wearing off. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, to enjoy seeing Valerie finally face consequences for her cruelty, but mostly I just felt tired and ready for this day to be over. Richard Alden turned back to me, and to my surprise, there were tears forming in his eyes. "Miss Carter, I don't even know where to begin. My daughter has apparently been tormenting you with my name as her weapon, and I had no idea it was happening. That ends today, I promise you that. But beyond that, you saved my wife's life today, and my new daughter's life. And you did it despite having every reason to let someone else handle it, or to simply walk away after how you'd been treated. I owe you a debt I can never fully repay. This hospital owes you a debt. What can I do to even begin to make this right?" Before I could formulate a response, Dr. Hendricks stepped forward again, and there was a gleam in his eye that suggested he had been waiting for exactly this moment. "Actually, Richard, I think this situation presents us with an opportunity to address something I've been meaning to discuss with the board. Daphne's performance today demonstrates exactly the kind of exceptional skill, leadership, and grace under pressure that we need in our senior nursing administration. I've been planning to recommend the creation of a new position, Director of Emergency Nursing Services, someone who would oversee protocols, train staff, and coordinate our response to critical situations. After what I witnessed today, or rather, what I didn't witness because I wasn't here when I was needed, it's clear we need someone with both the clinical excellence and the character to handle our most challenging moments. I'd like to formally nominate Daphne Carter for that position, effective immediately, with a substantial salary increase and full authority to make necessary changes to our emergency response systems. The proposal hung in the air like a gift I hadn't expected and wasn't sure I deserved, but the exhaustion and emotion of the day were making it hard to think clearly. Richard Alden nodded slowly, his business mind clearly already processing the implications and recognizing the rightness of the suggestion. "I think that's an excellent idea, Marcus. Miss Carter, would you accept such a position? And please, before you answer, I want you to know that this isn't charity or guilt or an attempt to buy your forgiveness. This is recognition of demonstrated excellence. What you did today is exactly what we need in our leadership, and if you're willing to take on that responsibility, I would consider it an honor to approve your appointment." I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could get words out, a nurse came hurrying down the hallway with an urgent expression on her face. "Daphne, you need to come quickly. Mrs. Alden is awake and she's asking for you specifically. She's getting agitated and we can't calm her down. The moment of decision would have to wait." I nodded to Richard and Dr. Hendricks and quickly followed the nurse back toward the recovery area, very aware that the entire Alden family was following close behind me. When we entered the recovery room, I found Monica Alden struggling to sit up, despite the protests of the recovery nurse, trying to keep her lying down. She looked pale and weak, with IV lines running into both arms and monitors tracking her vitals. But her eyes were bright, with an intensity that suggested she had something urgent to say. "Daphne," she gasped out when she saw me, reaching out a trembling hand in my direction. "Please, I need to talk to you. There's something I have to tell you, something I should have said months ago, but I was too much of a coward." I moved to her bedside immediately, gently pressing her back against the pillows, while checking her vitals on the monitors. Everything looked stable, but she was clearly distressed about something. "Monica, you need to rest. You've just been through major surgery and you lost a lot of blood. Whatever you need to tell me can wait until you're stronger." "No, it can't wait," she insisted, her grip on my hand surprisingly strong for someone in her condition. Her eyes moved past me to where I could sense her husband and daughter standing in the doorway, and tears began streaming down her cheeks. "Richard, Valerie, I need to tell you both something too, but Daphne especially needs to hear this because she deserves to know the truth." Richard moved to his wife's other side, taking her free hand in his face creased with concern. "Monica, what are you talking about? You're not making sense. You need to rest." But Monica shook her head vehemently, wincing at the pain the movement caused, but continuing anyway. "I've known for 6 months that Valerie was bullying Daphne. I heard her on the phone bragging about it to her friends, talking about the false reports she was filing, the lies she was spreading. And I said nothing. I told myself it wasn't my business, that Valerie was an adult and I couldn't control her behavior. But the truth is, I was jealous too. I was jealous of how young and vibrant Daphne is, how confident and capable. I'm 52 years old, pregnant with what everyone said was an impossible miracle baby, and I've spent most of my adult life in my husband's shadow, being Mrs. Richard Alden instead of being Monica. And when I saw this young woman who had built such respect and admiration through nothing but her own merit, I felt small and useless. So I let Valerie continue her cruelty because some petty part of me enjoyed seeing someone I envied being brought low. The confession spilled out of her in a rush, and I could see the shame and regret written across her face. I honestly didn't know how to respond. Learning that not just Valerie, but also her mother, had been complicit in the months of harassment and undermining felt like a fresh wound on top of the old ones. Monica continued, her voice growing stronger despite her physical weakness. But then today, when I felt that pain and knew something was terribly wrong, when I realized I might be dying and my baby might die with me, all I could think about was what a waste I'd made of my life. All the petty jealousies, all the times I'd stood by while someone else was hurt, all the ways I'd let fear and insecurity make me small and cruel. And then you were there, Daphne. You were there, and I saw in your eyes that you knew exactly who I was and what my daughter had done to you, but you were going to save me anyway. Not because I deserved it, but because that's who you are. You're everything I wish I had been brave enough to be. Monica, stop, I said gently but firmly, my own eyes burning with unexpected tears. I'm not some perfect person. I'm just someone who chose a profession and tries to do it well. You don't need to put me on a pedestal or confess your sins to me. What matters is that you're alive and your baby is alive and you have a chance to be better going forward. But Monica wasn't finished. She looked past me to Valerie, who was crying silently in the doorway, and her expression softened with maternal love mixed with stern disappointment. Valerie, my beautiful, brilliant girl, you have wasted so much of your potential being angry at people who have what you think you want. You're smart and you're capable, but you've been coasting on your father's reputation instead of building your own, and then resenting anyone who had the courage to do what you wouldn't. Today could have been the day you lost your mother and your baby sister, but instead it became the day you saw what real character looks like. I hope you learn from it. I hope you become the woman I know you can be, instead of the spoiled, cruel child you've been acting like. Valerie's sobs grew louder, and she stumbled forward to her mother's bedside, kneeling beside the bed and burying her face against Monica's arm. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry to both of you. I don't know how to be that person, but I want to learn. I want to be better. Richard Alden, who had been silent throughout this exchange, cleared his throat roughly, and I could see him struggling with his own emotions. I think I owe Daphne an apology as well. I've been so focused on expanding the hospital, on building our reputation and our market share, that I stopped paying attention to what was happening in my own family and under my own roof. If my daughter felt she could use my name to terrorize an employee and face no consequences, that's a failure of my leadership both as a father and as the head of this institution. I'm sorry, Daphne. Truly sorry. The weight of all these apologies and confessions was becoming overwhelming, pressing down on me like a physical burden that I hadn't asked to carry. I looked at these three people, this wealthy, powerful family who had caused me so much pain, and who were now laying themselves bare with remorse and vulnerability, and I realized that I had a choice to make. I could hold on to my anger and hurt, could make them pay for every humiliation and every sleepless night I'd spent worrying about my job and my future. Or I could do what I had been trained to do, what my heart had always pushed me toward. I could choose healing over revenge, grace over grudges, the hard work of forgiveness over the easy satisfaction of bitterness. I appreciate all of your apologies, I said slowly, choosing my words carefully while looking at each of them in turn. And I won't pretend that what happened didn't hurt me deeply, or that I can just forget months of harassment with a simple, I'm sorry. But I also know that people are complicated and capable of change, and that holding on to anger ultimately hurts me more than it hurts any of you. So here's what I need from each of you if we're going to move forward. I turned first to Valerie, who was still kneeling by her mother's bedside with tears streaming down her face. Valerie, I need you to understand that respect isn't something you can demand or inherit or buy. It's something you earn through consistent action, through showing up and doing the work and treating people with dignity, even when you don't have to. If you really want to be someone that people admire, you need to start by finding work that matters to you and doing it excellently. Not because of your last name, but despite it. And you need to make amends not just to me, but to every other person in this hospital you've treated poorly. That means genuine apologies, changed behavior, and probably a lot of humble pie. Can you do that? Valerie nodded vigorously, wiping at her face with the back of her hand. Yes, I can do that. I will do that. I know I don't deserve another chance. But if you're willing to give me one, I swear I'll prove that I can be better. I turned next to Monica, who was watching me with an expression that mixed hope with lingering shame. Monica, I need you to recognize that your silence was a form of complicity. When you see someone being hurt and you do nothing, you become part of the problem. Moving forward, I need you to be the kind of person who speaks up when something is wrong, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it means confronting your own family. Your daughter needed a mother who would correct her cruelty, not enable it. Can you be that person now? Monica's chin trembled, but she met my eyes steadily. Yes, I should have been that person all along, and I'm ashamed that it took nearly dying to wake me up to how I'd been living. I promise you, Daphne, I will never stand by silently again when I see someone being wronged, and I will do everything in my power to support you and protect you in this hospital going forward. Finally, I turned to Richard Alden, the man whose name had been wielded like a weapon against me, but who had also created the institution where I'd found my calling. Mr. Alden, I need you to understand that a hospital is only as good as how it treats its most vulnerable people, and that includes vulnerable employees as well as vulnerable patients. You've built something impressive here, but if people in positions of less power can be terrorized by people in positions of more power with no accountability, then you've built it on a rotten foundation. I need you to create systems and structures that protect staff from harassment, that give people channels to report abuse without fear of retaliation, and that make it clear that nobody, not even your own daughter, is above the basic rules of human decency. Can you do that? Richard Alden straightened his shoulders, and I saw the executive in him rising to meet a challenge. Yes, I can, and I will. Consider it done. I'll work with Dr. Hendricks and our HR department to completely overhaul our employee protection policies, and I'll make sure there are clear protected channels for reporting harassment at any level. And I want you involved in that process, Daphne. Your perspective is exactly what we need to build something that actually works rather than just looking good on paper. I felt something loosen in my chest, a knot of tension I'd been carrying for so long that I'd almost forgotten it was there. Then I accept your apologies, all of you. And Dr. Hendricks, if that job offer is still on the table, I accept that too. But I have some conditions. Dr. Hendricks, who had been watching this entire exchange with barely concealed satisfaction, nodded eagerly. Name them. First, I want real authority to make changes, not just a fancy title with no power. If I'm going to be Director of Emergency Nursing Services, I need to be able to implement new protocols, provide better training, and allocate resources where they're needed, without having to fight through layers of bureaucracy. Second, I want protection for my staff. Nobody working under me should ever have to go through what I went through. And if anyone tries to bully or harass my nurses, I need your support in addressing it immediately and effectively. And third, I want regular opportunities to work directly with patients. I didn't become a nurse to sit in an office, and I won't take a job that pulls me away from the bedside entirely. Dr. Hendricks was grinning broadly now. Done, done, and done. Richard, are you in agreement? Richard Alden nodded without hesitation. Completely. Daphne, you'll have everything you just asked for in writing as part of your contract. And I want to add one more thing. A formal commendation for your actions today to go in your permanent file and to be presented at the next hospital board meeting. What you did today exemplifies the absolute best of what medical professionals can be, and everyone should know it. Before I could respond to that, a young nurse appeared in the doorway looking apologetic for interrupting. I'm sorry, but the NICU asked me to let you know that baby Alden is stable and ready for family visitors if you'd like to come see her. Mrs. Alden, they said you should probably wait until tomorrow when you're stronger, but Mr. Alden and Miss Alden are welcome now. The mood in the room shifted immediately, the heavy weight of confession and apology lifting to make room for joy and wonder. Richard Alden's face transformed, exhaustion and stress giving way to the awed excitement of a new father. Valerie's tears changed quality, becoming tears of joy rather than shame and regret. Even Monica, despite her physical weakness, smiled with a radiance that made her look 10 years younger. "Go," I urged them gently. "Go meet your daughter and sister. Monica needs rest anyway, and you two should be with your new family member." Richard hesitated, looking torn between wanting to see his daughter and not wanting to leave his wife's side. But Monica shooed him away with a weak wave of her hand. "Go, you fool. Take your daughter and go meet our daughter. Take lots of pictures for me. I'll be here when you get back." Father and daughter left together, Richard's arm around Valerie's shoulders, their earlier tension replaced by shared purpose and anticipation. As they disappeared down the hallway, I turned back to Monica to check her vitals one more time and make sure she was settled comfortably. She caught my hand again before I could step away. "Thank you," she said simply. "Not just for saving my life, but for giving all of us a chance to be better. You could have destroyed us today with justified anger, but instead you offered us grace. That's the kind of person I want my daughters to grow up seeing as an example. Both of my daughters." I squeezed her hand gently. "Rest now, Monica. You've got a long recovery ahead and 2 daughters who need you to be strong. Focus on that." As I left the recovery room, I found Dr. Hendricks waiting for me in the hallway, that satisfied expression still on his face. "You handled that beautifully, Daphne. Not many people could have navigated that situation with such grace and wisdom. I meant what I said about that position, you know. It's been approved in principle for months, but we couldn't find the right person. I think we just did." "I appreciate that, Dr. Hendricks, but right now I really just want to go home, take the longest shower of my life, and sleep for about 12 hours. Can we handle the administrative details tomorrow?" He laughed and clapped me gently on the shoulder. "Absolutely. Go home, Daphne. You've more than earned it. We'll talk specifics in a day or 2. I finally made it to the locker room, where I changed out of my blood-stained scrubs and into my street clothes, each movement heavy with exhaustion, but also with a strange sense of lightness. As I caught sight of myself in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. I looked tired, older than my 36 years. But there was something else there too, a quiet strength, a confidence that came from knowing I had faced an impossible situation and emerged victorious, not just in terms of medical outcome, but in terms of character. My phone buzzed with a text message, and I pulled it out to find several messages from colleagues who had heard about the emergency. Sarah Martinez, one of my closest friends among the nursing staff, had written, "OMG, Daphne, I just heard what happened. You're an absolute legend. Drinks on me this weekend to celebrate you being a superhero." I smiled despite my exhaustion and typed back, "I'm not a superhero, just a nurse who was in the right place at the right time. But I'll definitely take you up on those drinks. I think I've earned them." As I gathered my things and headed toward the exit, I passed through the main lobby where families waited for news of their loved ones and where the normal chaos of a busy hospital continued unabated. I thought about how many times I'd walked through this lobby over the past 15 years, how many lives I'd touched, how many crises I'd helped navigate. This building had been my second home, these hallways my daily landscape, and these people, both colleagues and patients, had become an extended family. I walked through the automatic doors into the cool evening air, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe fully. The weight I'd been carrying, the constant stress of wondering if today would be the day Valerie succeeded in getting me fired, the exhaustion of always being on guard, all of it had lifted. I stood there for a moment in the parking lot, watching the sun sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and I let myself feel the full emotional impact of everything that had happened. My hands started shaking as the adrenaline finally finished draining from my system, and I found myself leaning against my car, gulping air as delayed shock caught up with me. I had saved 2 lives today. I had performed surgery that by all rights should have been beyond my scope of practice, but that circumstances had demanded and that I had risen to meet. I had held someone's life and death in my hands, and I had chosen life, successfully, miraculously. I also realized with crystalline clarity that this had been a turning point not just in my career, but in my understanding of who I was and what I was capable of. For months, Valerie's campaign against me had made me question my own worth, had made me wonder if perhaps I was overestimating my abilities or my value to the hospital. She had succeeded to some degree in making me feel small and uncertain, but today had proved beyond any doubt that I was exactly as good at my job as I'd always believed, that my years of experience and training had prepared me for even the most challenging circumstances, and that my commitment to my patients transcended personal grievances or wounded pride. As I drove home through the familiar streets of Philadelphia, past the row houses and corner stores and parks where children played in the fading light, I thought about the strange justice of the day. I hadn't sought revenge against Valerie or her family. I hadn't gloated or made them beg or used my position of power over Monica's life to extract promises or concessions. I had simply done my job, excellently and without hesitation, and in doing so, I had demonstrated a kind of character that no amount of money or status could buy. The truth was, I had won this confrontation not by defeating Valerie, but by being so thoroughly myself that her cruelty became irrelevant. She had tried to diminish me, but you cannot diminish someone who knows their own worth. She had tried to destroy my reputation, but reputation built on genuine skill and compassionate care cannot be destroyed by lies. And when the moment came that revealed everyone's true character, I had shone, while her ugliness had been exposed. But more than that, I had created the possibility for redemption. By responding to Valerie's cruelty with grace rather than revenge, by saving Monica despite having every reason to hesitate, by offering the Alden family a path forward built on accountability and change rather than punishment and shame, I had opened a door to transformation. Whether they would walk through that door remained to be seen, but at least the possibility existed. When I arrived home to my small but comfortable apartment, I found my cat, Biscuit, waiting by the door with his usual demanding meow that meant he was deeply offended by my late arrival and the delayed delivery of his dinner. I laughed, scooped him up, and buried my face in his soft fur, letting the normalcy of this routine ground me after an extraordinary day. "You will not believe the day I had, Biscuit," I told him as I set him down and headed to the kitchen to fill his bowl. "Your mom is apparently a hero, though I'm still not entirely sure how that happened." As Biscuit attacked his food with single-minded focus, I finally allowed myself to do what I'd been putting off all day. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring, her familiar voice immediately warming something in my chest that I hadn't realized had gone cold. "Daphne, sweetheart, I was just thinking about you. How was your day?" And then, to my surprise, I started crying. Not sad tears or scared tears, but the overwhelming emotional release of someone who has been holding everything together through sheer force of will and can finally let go. My mother, with that uncanny parental intuition that never quite fades even when your children are adults, immediately shifted from casual greeting to concerned attention. "Baby, what's wrong? What happened? Are you okay?" Through gulping breaths and tears that wouldn't stop flowing, I told her everything. The months of harassment from Valerie, the humiliation that morning, the emergency with Monica, the surgery, the apologies, the job offer, all of it spilled out in a disjointed rush, while my mother listened with the patient attention she'd always given my childhood dramas. Except this time, the drama was real, and the stakes had been life and death. When I finally wound down, there was a moment of silence before my mother spoke, and I could hear tears in her voice, too. "Daphne Marie Carter, I have never been more proud of you than I am right now. Not because you saved those women's lives, though that's incredible, but because of how you handled everything else. You could have been bitter. You could have been cruel. You could have let that girl's treatment of you turn you into something ugly. But instead, you stayed true to who you've always been. Kind, skilled, dedicated, and graceful even when grace is hard. That's my girl. That's my daughter. Her words broke something loose in me that had been tightly wound for so long, and I cried harder. But these were healing tears, cleansing tears, the kind that wash away accumulated pain and make room for new growth. We talked for another hour, my mother sharing wisdom from her own 40 years as a school teacher, dealing with difficult parents and challenging situations, reminding me that the best revenge is always becoming so thoroughly yourself that your detractors become irrelevant. After we hung up, I took that long-promised shower, letting hot water wash away not just the physical remnants of the day, but also the last clinging traces of doubt and insecurity that Valerie's campaign had planted. I stood under the spray until the water ran cold, and when I finally emerged, wrapped in my softest bathrobe with my hair dripping down my back, I felt more like myself than I had in months. I made myself a simple dinner, fed Biscuit again because he insisted he was starving despite having eaten an hour ago, and settled onto my couch with a cup of tea. My phone kept buzzing with messages from colleagues, friends, even former patients who had somehow heard about the day's events through the hospital grapevine. The story was apparently spreading fast. The bullied nurse who had saved her tormentor's family, the dramatic emergency surgery, the tearful confrontations and apologies. I could already tell this was going to become one of those hospital legends that would be told and retold for years. But I found I didn't mind. Let them tell the story. Let it spread. Maybe it would remind other people that how we respond to cruelty defines us far more than the cruelty itself. Maybe it would inspire other nurses to trust their skills and stand firm in their worth. Maybe it would make other Valeries think twice before using their power to hurt people who can't fight back. Or maybe it would just be a good story, a reminder that sometimes, just sometimes, the universe delivers justice in the most unexpected and perfect ways. I was just starting to doze off on the couch, Biscuit curled up on my lap, when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Miss Carter, this is Richard Alden. I hope I'm not calling too late. I sat up straighter, suddenly wide awake. Mr. Alden, no, it's fine. Is everything okay? Is Monica all right? Everyone's fine, he assured me quickly. Monica's resting comfortably and the baby is doing wonderfully. I just wanted to call you personally to say something I didn't get a chance to say earlier. I've been in the business world for 35 years, Daphne. I've worked with thousands of people, hired and fired hundreds, negotiated countless deals and contracts. And in all that time, I've rarely met someone who demonstrated the kind of character you showed today. You didn't just save my wife and daughter's lives. You saved my family in a much bigger way. You showed my daughter what real strength looks like, what earned respect means. You gave my wife a reason to examine her own behavior and choices, and you reminded me what the medical profession is supposed to be about. I just wanted you to know that I see that, I appreciate it, and I will never forget it. His words, coming from a man I'd seen only as a distant figurehead and the source of his daughter's borrowed authority, touched me deeply. Thank you, Mr. Alden. That means a lot. I also wanted you to know that I spoke with the board tonight in an emergency session. Your appointment as Director of Emergency Nursing Services was approved unanimously, with all the conditions you requested. Dr. Hendricks will have the formal offer letter and contract ready for you by the end of the week, but I wanted you to know immediately. And Daphne? I'm planning to establish a new annual award at St. Alden, the Daphne Carter Award for Excellence in Nursing, to be given to a nurse who demonstrates not just clinical excellence, but also character, compassion, and grace under pressure. You'll be the first recipient, of course, but more importantly, you'll be the standard we hold up for everyone who follows. I was speechless for a moment, overwhelmed by the unexpected honor. I don't know what to say, Mr. Alden. That's incredibly generous, but honestly, I just did my job. No, Daphne, you did much more than your job. And the hospital and my family and this community are better because you did. Now get some rest. You've earned it. We'll talk soon. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of my living room, Biscuit purring contentedly on my lap, and I let myself feel the full weight of accomplishment and vindication. This morning I had been a nurse under threat, wondering if I would even have a job by the end of the week. Tonight I was being offered a promotion, a significant raise, an award in my name, and most importantly, the respect and appreciation that I had always deserved, but that had been systematically denied to me. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through my bedroom window and the unusual sensation of having actually slept through the night without waking once. Biscuit was sprawled across my chest, his considerable weight making breathing slightly challenging, but I didn't have the heart to move him. I lay there for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling and replaying the previous day's events in my mind, half convinced it had all been some elaborate dream. But the soreness in my muscles from the tension of surgery and the dozens of messages still waiting on my phone confirmed that it had all been very, very real. I had the day off, scheduled weeks ago, but I found myself restless and unable to settle into my usual routine. After feeding Biscuit and making myself a proper breakfast for the first time in weeks, I decided to go for a walk in the park near my apartment. The autumn air was crisp and clean, and the trees were showing off their most brilliant colors, as if nature itself was celebrating with me. As I walked the familiar paths, I thought about what came next. The job offer was incredible, and I was genuinely excited about the opportunity to shape emergency nursing protocols and training. But I also felt a twinge of apprehension. Would I be any good at administration? Would I miss the direct patient care that had always been the heart of my work? Could I really change hospital culture and protect vulnerable staff the way I'd promised? My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Hendricks. "Daphne, when you have a moment, could you stop by my office? There's someone who wants to meet you. No rush, but this afternoon would be ideal if you're free." I texted back that I could be there in an hour and quickly headed home to change into something more professional than my walking clothes. As I drove back to St. Alden, I felt a strange mixture of excitement and nervousness. This was the first time I'd be returning to the hospital not as a target of harassment, but as someone recognized and valued. When I arrived at Dr. Hendricks' office, I was surprised to find not just him, but also Richard Alden, and unexpectedly a woman I didn't recognize. She was perhaps in her early 60s, dressed in an elegant business suit, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and eyes that sparkled with intelligence and warmth. "Daphne, thank you for coming in on your day off," Dr. Hendricks said, standing to greet me. "I'd like you to meet Dr. Patricia Morrison. She's a consultant we've brought in to help us restructure our nursing department and establish the new emergency services division. I thought it would be helpful for you two to meet before we finalize your position." Dr. Morrison extended her hand with a warm smile. "Miss Carter, it's an absolute pleasure. I've been reading your file and hearing about yesterday's events, and I have to say, I'm thoroughly impressed. I've spent 30 years working in hospital administration across the country, and I rarely encounter someone with your combination of clinical excellence and leadership potential. I'm very much looking forward to working with you." We spent the next 2 hours in what was ostensibly a meeting, but felt more like an intensive conversation about the future of nursing at St. Alden. Dr. Morrison asked probing questions about my vision for emergency services, about the challenges I'd observed in the current system, about what resources and support I would need to be successful. She listened intently to my answers, occasionally making notes, but more often nodding with understanding that suggested she'd seen similar issues in other hospitals. "One of the things that concerns me most," I found myself saying, "is that we have incredible talent among our nursing staff, but we don't always create pathways for that talent to develop and advance. We lose good nurses to burnout or to other institutions that value them more, and we fail to protect them from the kind of harassment and undermining that I experienced. If I'm going to take on this role, I want to build a department where every nurse feels seen, valued, and supported, where clinical excellence is recognized and rewarded, and where there are clear consequences for anyone who tries to create a toxic work environment. Dr. Morrison smiled broadly. That's exactly the kind of vision we need. Richard, I think you found your director. Richard Alden, who had been mostly quiet throughout the meeting, nodded firmly. I agree completely. Daphne, I know we discussed this briefly yesterday, but I want to make it official. We're offering you the position of Director of Emergency Nursing Services with a starting salary of $175,000, full benefits, and the authority to make staffing and protocol decisions within your department. You'll report directly to Dr. Hendricks and have a seat at senior leadership meetings. Dr. Morrison will work with you for the first 6 months to help establish the department and train your replacement for your current floor duties. What do you say? The number took my breath away. I'd been making $68,000 as a floor nurse, a respectable salary, but not enough to do much more than cover my bills and save a little. This represented not just a promotion, but a complete transformation of my financial security. But more than the money, it was the validation, the recognition that my skills and vision had value at the highest levels of the hospital. I say yes, I answered, my voice steady despite the emotions churning inside. And I promise you won't regret this decision. I'm going to build something here that makes St. Alden a model for how hospitals should train, support, and value their nursing staff. The handshakes and congratulations that followed felt surreal, as if I'd stepped into someone else's life. But as we concluded the meeting and I prepared to leave, Dr. Morrison pulled me aside for a quiet word. Daphne, I want you to know something. I've seen a lot of nurses over my career, and I've seen even more people who were given opportunities they didn't deserve or weren't ready for. You are neither of those things. You have earned this position through years of excellent work and through demonstrating grace under the kind of pressure that breaks lesser people. Don't doubt yourself or your worthiness. You belong here, in leadership, shaping the future of this institution. Own that truth. Her words struck deep, addressing doubts I hadn't even fully articulated to myself. I thanked her with genuine emotion and made my way out of the administrative offices, my head spinning with plans and possibilities. As I walked through the hospital corridors toward the exit, I was stopped multiple times by colleagues offering congratulations. The news of my promotion had apparently spread quickly through the hospital grapevine. Nurses I'd mentored over the years hugged me with genuine excitement. Doctors who had worked with me on difficult cases shook my hand and expressed their approval. Even some of the patients I'd cared for in recent weeks, now walking the halls in recovery, stopped to thank me and share their happiness at my advancement. But the encounter that moved me most came near the main entrance, where I quite literally bumped into Valerie Alden. She was carrying a massive bouquet of flowers and looked like she'd barely slept. With dark circles under her eyes and her usually immaculate hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. When she saw me, she froze, and I could see actual fear flash across her face, as if she thought I might attack her or unleash some stored-up anger. "Daphne," she said quietly, her voice lacking any of its usual arrogance. "I was just coming to find you, actually. I wanted to give you these." She held out the flowers, an expensive arrangement of roses and lilies. "I know flowers can't make up for how I treated you, but I wanted to give you something beautiful, because that's what you deserve. And it's the opposite of everything I gave you before." I took the flowers, genuinely touched by the gesture, even though she was right that it couldn't erase months of cruelty. "Thank you, Valerie. That's very thoughtful." She swallowed hard, clearly working up courage for something. "I also wanted to tell you that I spent all night thinking about what you said yesterday, about earning respect through action, and I've made a decision. I'm going to enroll in nursing school." That genuinely surprised me. Nursing school? "Valerie, you don't have to become a nurse to prove anything to me or your family." "I'm not doing it to prove anything," she said, and there was a determination in her voice that I'd never heard before. "I'm doing it because yesterday, watching you work, seeing what you did and how you did it, I realized that's what I want. I want to be someone who actually helps people, who has skills that matter, who earns respect instead of demanding it. I have a bachelor's degree in communications that I've done absolutely nothing with except use it as a credential I didn't earn. I want to do something real, something that matters. And if I'm going to learn to be a nurse, I can't think of a better example to follow than you." I studied her carefully, looking for any sign of manipulation or insincerity. But all I saw was a young woman who had been genuinely shaken by the events of the previous day and who was trying, however imperfectly, to find a better path forward. Nursing school is incredibly difficult, Valerie. It's not something you can coast through on your family name. You'll be starting from the bottom and you'll have to work harder than you've probably ever worked in your life. "I know," she said simply, "and I'm ready for that. I need that, actually. I've spent my whole life taking shortcuts and looking for easy paths, and look where it got me. 28 years old with no real accomplishments, no genuine relationships, and a reputation as a spoiled bully. I want to be different. I want to be better. And I'm hoping that maybe, once I've proven that I'm serious about this, you might consider mentoring me. Not now," she added quickly, seeing my expression. "I know I have no right to ask that now, but someday, if I prove myself, if I show you that I've really changed, maybe you'd be willing to help me become the kind of nurse you are." It was perhaps the most humble and self-aware I'd ever heard Valerie sound. And despite my lingering hurt and skepticism, I found myself moved by her sincerity. If you're serious about this, if you actually complete nursing school and start working as a nurse, then yes, I'll consider mentoring you. But Valerie, you need to understand something. Becoming a nurse isn't about redemption or proving something to your family or earning my forgiveness. It has to be about genuinely wanting to care for people, to make a difference in their lives when they're at their most vulnerable. If that's really what drives you, then you'll make a good nurse. But if you're doing this for any other reason, you'll burn out, or worse, you'll hurt people. So really think about why you want this before you commit. She nodded seriously. "I will, I promise. And Daphne, thank you. Not just for saving my mom and sister, but for showing me what real strength looks like. I'm going to try to be worthy of that example." As Valerie walked away, I stood there in the hospital lobby holding an expensive bouquet of flowers and thinking about the strange circular nature of justice and redemption. Yesterday morning, I had been a target. Today I was being promoted and given flowers by my former tormentor. Life, I reflected, had a way of surprising you with its plot twists. 3 months later, I stood in the same hospital lobby, but everything had changed. The director of emergency nursing services office that had been carved out for me was on the 4th floor, with a window overlooking the city and a desk that still felt too big. I'd spent those months working with Dr. Morrison to completely restructure emergency response protocols, establish new training programs, and create a reporting system that actually protected staff from harassment. We'd hired 6 new nurses, promoted 3 existing staff members to leadership positions, and begun implementing changes that were already showing measurable improvements in patient outcomes and staff satisfaction. The Daphne Carter Award for Excellence in Nursing had been officially established, with a beautiful plaque mounted in the main hallway listing my name as the first recipient. The hospital had held a ceremony 2 weeks prior, where Richard Alden had publicly thanked me and shared the story of that day with the entire staff and board. It had been simultaneously wonderful and embarrassing, standing there while people applauded and my mother cried proud tears in the audience. But the most surprising development had come from Monica Alden. She had recovered fully from the surgery and had given birth to a healthy, thriving baby girl named Emma Grace. Emma was now 2 months old, and Monica had insisted on bringing her to the hospital for me to see regularly. More than that, Monica had become an unexpected advocate for nursing excellence, using her position as the hospital owner's wife to push for better working conditions, higher salaries, and more recognition for nursing staff. She had even established a scholarship fund for nursing students, particularly those from underrepresented backgrounds, that would fully fund their education in exchange for a commitment to work at St. Aldan for at least 3 years after graduation. I spent too many years being petty and small, Monica had told me during one of her visits. But you gave me a second chance at life and a second chance to be better. I'm not going to waste it. As for Valerie, she had been true to her word. She had enrolled in an accelerated nursing program and was currently surviving, if barely, the brutal first semester. She sent me occasional texts asking for advice or just venting about the workload, and I always responded with encouragement and honest guidance. I wasn't ready to call us friends, and I wasn't sure we ever would be, but there was a cautious, mutual respect growing between us that felt like the beginning of something potentially meaningful. The sound of my phone ringing pulled me from my reflections. It was the ER calling with notification of a multi-vehicle accident coming in, all hands on deck. Even though I was no longer a floor nurse, I had made good on my promise to Dr. Hendricks that I wouldn't abandon direct patient care entirely. I grabbed my stethoscope from my office and headed down to the ER, my heart already shifting into that focused, calm state that emergency situations demanded. As I pushed through the doors into organized chaos, as I saw nurses and doctors moving with practiced efficiency, as I stepped in to help triage and treat, I felt that familiar sense of purpose and rightness that had drawn me to nursing in the first place. This was who I was, not Director Carter or award recipient or example to others, but simply Daphne, a nurse who had dedicated her life to helping people in their darkest moments. That evening, after the crisis had passed and all the accident victims had been stabilized or transferred to surgery, I stood once again in the lobby preparing to head home. The sun was setting through the large windows, painting everything in golden light, and I paused to appreciate the beauty of the moment. A nurse I didn't recognize, probably new to the staff, approached me hesitantly. "Excuse me, are you Daphne Carter?" she asked shyly. I smiled and nodded. "I am." Her face lit up with excitement. "I just wanted to say that you're the reason I applied to work here. I heard about what you did, how you handled that emergency, and how you stood up to bullying with grace instead of anger. And I thought, that's the kind of nurse I want to be. That's the kind of place I want to work. So thank you for being an example and for making St. Aldan the kind of hospital where people like me want to build our careers." I was momentarily speechless, moved by her words in a way I hadn't expected. "What's your name?" I asked. Jessica Torres. I just started last week." "Well, Jessica Torres, welcome to St. Aldan. If you ever need anything, advice or support, or just someone to talk to, my door is always open. We take care of each other here, and we protect each other. That's the culture we're building, and you're part of that now." She thanked me with tears in her eyes and hurried off to finish her shift, leaving me standing there with my own eyes suspiciously moist. This, I realized, was the real victory. Not the promotion or the award or the vindication, but the knowledge that my actions had inspired someone else to pursue excellence and that I was helping create an environment where nurses could thrive. As I finally made it to my car and started the drive home, I thought about how the story could have gone differently if I had responded to Valerie's cruelty with my own cruelty, if I had hesitated to help Monica out of spite or revenge, if I had let bitterness poison my response to an emergency. Where would I be now? Probably unemployed, certainly unhappy, and definitely not making a positive impact on the hospital culture. Instead, by choosing grace over grudges, by doing my job excellently regardless of personal grievances, by believing that people could change and offering them the chance to do so, I had not only saved lives, but transformed them, including my own. I had proven that the best response to those who try to diminish you is not to fight them on their level, but to rise so far above them that their attacks become irrelevant. When I arrived home, Biscuit greeted me with his usual demanding meow, and I scooped him up for a cuddle. "Your mom had a good day," I told him as he purred against my chest. "Your mom is building something important, changing lives, making a difference. And it all started because I refused to let someone else's cruelty change who I am." I made dinner, fed the cat, and settled onto my couch with a glass of wine and a book I'd been trying to finish for weeks. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Saw your interview in the Philadelphia Inquirer today about the new nursing initiatives at St. Alden. So proud of you, sweetheart. You're changing the world one nurse at a time." I smiled and texted back a heart emoji, too content for more words. As I sat there in the comfortable silence of my apartment, Biscuit sprawled across my lap and purring contentedly, I reflected on the strange and wonderful journey that had brought me to this moment. 6 months ago, I had been wondering if I'd even have a job by the end of the week. Now I was a director, an award recipient, a mentor, an example, and most importantly, still a nurse who loved her work and the people she served. The hospital owner's daughter had tried to destroy me, had told me I was nobody, and that I'd be fired, had made my life miserable for months. But when her mother's life hung in the balance, I had been the only one who could save her. I hadn't saved Monica to prove a point or earn gratitude or secure my position. I had saved her because that's what I do. Because every life matters. Because my commitment to my patients transcends personal grievances. And in doing so, I had won something far more valuable than revenge. I had won respect, opportunity, and the chance to shape the future of nursing at St. Alden. I had won the satisfaction of knowing that when tested under the worst possible circumstances, I had revealed the best of who I am. I had won the knowledge that grace and excellence and integrity will ultimately triumph over cruelty and pettiness and spite. But perhaps most importantly, I had won the understanding that we don't defeat our enemies by destroying them. We defeat them by refusing to become like them, by maintaining our values even when it would be easier to abandon them, by choosing who we want to be regardless of how others choose to treat us. As I drifted off to sleep that night, my last thoughts were not of Valerie's cruelty, or Monica's life-threatening emergency, or even my own unlikely triumph. Instead, I thought about Jessica Torres, the young nurse who had approached me in the lobby, and about all the other young nurses who might be inspired by my example to pursue excellence and choose grace. If my story could help even one person become a better nurse, a better caregiver, a better human being, then everything I had endured had been worth it. The hospital owner's daughter had screamed that I was nobody and I was fired, but fate had shown her and everyone else exactly who I was. Daphne Carter, a nurse who saves lives, not because it's easy or convenient or personally advantageous, but because that's what nurses do. We show up, we do the work, we hold people's hands through their darkest moments, and we choose compassion over cruelty every single time. And in the end, that choice had made all the difference.